They don't value loud women. They notice quiet power, not because you speak, but because you don't need to. The most irresistible women aren't chasing attention, they're mastering presence. And behind that silence lives a secret. Psychology that rewires how men see you. You were taught to talk, to please, to perform. But Jung would say, the woman who transforms a man's soul speaks in archetypes, not demands. She listens without reacting, sets boundaries without drama. She becomes unforgettable, not through what she says, but through what she withholds. And today, I'll show you exactly how to embody that silent magnetism without losing yourself. True silence is not emptiness, it's invitation. When the world quiets down, the unconscious steps forward. You don't hear less, you hear more, the buried, the denied, the forgotten. Jung called it the shadow, and it only speaks when we stop talking. This is not absence. This is initiation. Many run from silence, mistaking it for loneliness. But silence is sacred space, where the self begins to whisper. It reveals not chaos, but clarity, stripped of distractions. In this space, you stop performing and start perceiving, and what you perceive often changes everything. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your reflection in the dark. It shows you the parts you've exiled: rage, desire, sorrow, strength. In silence, these voices return, not to haunt, but to heal. The woman who welcomes them becomes whole, not louder, but deeper. Imagine silence as a black mirror. It doesn't flatter, doesn't edit. It reflects. And that reflection shows you what persona tried to hide. It asks, are you willing to see without fleeing? Most aren't, but those who are, awaken. You can't integrate what you don't face, and you can't face what you won't hear. The silence becomes a portal, not to stillness, but to truth. And truth, even when painful, is freeing. It's the beginning of transformation. Women who dwell in this silence carry power in their stillness. They don't need to shout to command respect. Their calm unsettles because it reveals depth. You feel them before they speak. That's not charisma. That's coherence, but silence is only the first threshold. Once you pass through it, a new challenge appears. Can you wear your mask without becoming it? Can you use the persona without being the persona? That's the next gate, where presence becomes choice. Presence isn't about being noticed. It's about being anchored. It's not the loudest voice that commands the room, but the most aligned. And alignment begins with a conscious persona, one you choose, not inherit. Jung saw the persona as a necessary mask, not a lie. But the lie begins when you forget it's a mask. Most people wear their persona like skin, fused, fixed, forgotten. But the conscious woman selects hers like a robe, with care, timing, and intention. She can be soft or sharp, visible or silent, but always aware. Her energy isn't forced, it's chosen, and that choice becomes magnetic. This isn't about being real all the time. It's about being strategic without losing yourself. Authenticity isn't raw exposure, it's aligned expression. You speak when it serves. You withhold when it empowers. This is emotional fluency, not performance. People feel when you're congruent, when your body and words carry the same signal. They trust you without knowing why. Because your energy doesn't leak, it lands. And that landing leaves a trace. The conscious persona lets you move between worlds. You can lead, nurture, seduce, retreat. Without fragmentation, you become shapeshifter and source, mirror, and flame. Not because you're pretending, but because you're whole. Wholeness doesn't need one face. Women who master this are misunderstood, too calm, too quiet, too powerful. But what they truly are is present. They walk with intention, not impulse. They see and choose when to be seen, But knowing when to appear also reveals something deeper. Because once you stop performing, you begin listening, not just to others, but to your own silence. And in that silence rises a new kind of strength. The inner masculine, the animus, now steps forward. True self-sufficiency isn't detachment, it's inner union. When a woman integrates her animus, the inner masculine, she stops outsourcing stability. She becomes her own guide, protector, and decision-maker, not because she rejects others, but because she no longer needs them to feel whole. This is sovereignty, not solitude. The animus isn't a warrior, he's a compass. He doesn't dominate, he directs. When undeveloped, he criticizes. When integrated, he clarifies. He helps her act without apology, speak without performance, and most of all, hold her ground in silence. This woman knows how to say no. Not with anger, but with calm certainty. Her boundaries are not walls, they are sacred gates. She chooses what enters, what stays, and what ends. And her animus guards those thresholds. She doesn't wait for validation. She doesn't beg for being chosen. She creates, decides, leads, not out of ego, but clarity. And that clarity feels like stillness in a world of noise. It's not ambition. It's alignment. The integrated animus ends emotional chaos. She no longer swings between overgiving and resentment. She no longer fears being alone. She values it. Because in solitude, she hears her own voice, and that voice is enough. People may call her intimidating, but what they really feel is her completion. She doesn't orbit anyone. She's her own center. Her presence doesn't plead, it commands. Without noise, without force, without explanation, and when that presence stabilizes, she no longer reacts to everything. She responds. And in that response lives a new mastery, the ability to meet conflict without losing control. Emotional control is not suppression. It's integration. It's the pause between stimulus and response where power is born. Jung taught that the shadow holds every impulse we deny, and when we repress it, it controls us. But when we face it, it becomes our ally. A woman who has met her shadow no longer overreacts. She recognizes the pattern, the trigger, the wound, and instead of collapsing, she chooses. Her calm isn't coldness, it's depth. She feels everything, but obeys. Nothing blindly. You can feel when someone has done this work. They don't escalate, they contain. Their silence is not absence, it's awareness. They don't need to prove or perform. They respond from presence, not pain. This doesn't mean she stops feeling. It means she stops being owned by feelings. Anger becomes clarity, sadness becomes wisdom, emotion becomes energy, informed. That's emotional alchemy. The soul in motion. Most fear the shadow because they mistake it for darkness. But it holds untapped truth, the rage that says no more, the grief that reveals value, the desire that leads to purpose. She's no longer seduced by chaos. She no longer needs others to mirror her pain. She holds it herself, breathes through it, learns from it. Her reactions no longer shape her identity. Her choices do. And once she masters this inner weather, she becomes coherent, her words, her gaze, her presence, aligned, and that alignment opens the next door, living in integrity with the self. Coherence is when your soul stops contradicting itself, when your words, actions, and emotions flow from the same source, not for performance, but because you're no longer divided. Jung saw the self as psychological wholeness, and coherence is how that wholeness speaks. Most people live fragmented. They say yes while meaning no. They smile while grieving. That fracture creates confusion, not just for others but within. And the soul, when ignored, starts to withdraw. A coherent woman is unmistakable, not because she's loud, but because she's real. She doesn't bend her truth to be liked. She doesn't shift shapes to fit rooms. Her integrity is felt, not declared. But coherence takes courage. It asks you to lose roles you once survived inside. It asks you to disappoint others in order, to honor yourself, to stop betraying your body to protect their feelings. And that is revolutionary. In coherence, you become calm, not numb, but centered. You don't rush to explain, to be understood. You know who you are, and that knowing radiates more than explanation ever could. This is not about perfection. It's about alignment in motion, owning your mistakes, speaking your truth, living. So fully inside your values that peace finds you, not because you chased it, but because you matched it. And when you live in coherence, you start defending sacred space, not just your time or body, but your energy. And that's when the guardian within you awakens, the one who protects what truly matters. Respecting space is a sacred art, not avoidance. It's the choice to preserve what is essential, rather than prove it. When a woman says, "not now," or "not here," without guilt, she awakens the guardian archetype within, not to protect us, not ego, but to defend her inner sanctuary. This guardian doesn't yell or block. She clarifies with presence. Her energy says, "This space is sacred. Treat it as such." And those who enter feel it instantly. It's not about distance. It's about discernment. Jung taught that archetypes live in the unconscious. The guardian is the one who honors boundaries as spiritual gates. She chooses who enters, what energy stays, and what must go. She doesn't justify her no. It's already complete. And that completion feels like stillness. Women in this energy are often misjudged. Cold, difficult, too much. But the truth is, they've simply stopped abandoning themselves. They no longer betray peace for proximity. They've learned to listen to space. Holding space is an act of love, for self and for others. It says, "I won't invade you, and I won't let you invade me." It creates clarity, not conflict. And through that clarity, deep trust becomes possible. Because boundaries create safety, not walls. This guardian doesn't fight to be respected. She embodies respect. Her energy teaches by example, and in her silence, others adjust, not from fear, from reverence. And once space is honored, something rare awakens. You begin to hear what's beneath the noise, not just in others, but in yourself. The art of deep listening returns. And that's the next threshold, hearing the collective soul. To listen deeply is to descend into the invisible, not just hearing words, but sensing what lies beneath them. A woman who truly listens becomes a mirror for the unsaid. And in that reflection, something ancient surfaces, the collective unconscious, where all souls are linked. Jung taught that we carry symbols older than memory, stories we've never told, yet somehow remember. When you listen from presence, not judgment, you access these deeper patterns. You don't just hear, you feel myth speaking. This kind of listening is rare. It requires stillness within, a mind that doesn't rush. It means holding space without fixing, letting another unravel, and simply witnessing. That witnessing alone heals. When you listen like this, people open, not because you advise, but because you see. They feel safe, not in your answers, but in your presence. You don't need to speak. Your silence becomes sanctuary. But this listening transforms the listener too. You begin hearing yourself more clearly. Old patterns echo back in others' voices. And suddenly, healing becomes shared, not private, but archetypal. Women who hold this kind of presence carry deep gravity. They attract truth, not gossip, emotion, not performance. They speak less, but everything they say lands, because they've been listening long before. They respond, and this capacity opens the heart to something greater, not just empathy, but reverence. And from that reverence, gratitude arises, quietly. Not the kind you say out loud, but the one you live in silence. Some gratitude doesn't need to be spoken. It lives in the body, in the breath, in the way you soften. It's not a thank you, it's a frequency. And when a woman lives in that frequency, the inner healer archetype awakens within her. Jung saw healing as the reunion of what was once split, and a silent gratitude is a thread that weaves those pieces back together, not by force but by reverence, by saying yes to the path, even the painful parts, by honoring the wound as teacher. This healer doesn't fix others. She holds space where others begin to fix themselves. Her presence soothes, because it doesn't demand. It simply radiates wholeness, even if she's still healing, because healing is not perfection, it's integration. Gratitude without performance is powerful. It turns survival into meaning. It blesses endings. It softens grief. It says, "This too shaped me." And that soft acknowledgement rewires the soul. Women in this energy become alchemists. They turn silence into medicine. They don't need closure to release. They don't need certainty to trust. Their faith lives in stillness. This isn't naive positivity. It's sacred perspective. It's the ability to thank what once broke you, not because it was good, but because you grew. And that growth becomes presence. From this presence, another truth emerges. That integrity is the ultimate expression of gratitude. To live aligned, even without applause. To honor the self, not just in healing, but in being. And that leads to the next step, embodied integrity. Integrity isn't about being perfect, it's about being whole. When your choices match your soul, something shifts. You stop seeking validation and start standing in truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one claps. That's when the self steps forward. Jung described the self as the center of our inner totality. Not a mask, not a role, but the deep truth beneath them. Living from this place requires courage, because integrity costs comfort, but it gives you peace. A woman in integrity doesn't negotiate with her values. She doesn't contort herself to be liked. Her no is clear, and her yes is clean. You feel her stability in every choice, because her life is her message. She's not driven by perception, but by alignment. She can walk away without bitterness, stay without people-pleasing, love without losing herself. This is strength wrapped in stillness. Integrity is also tenderness. It includes your shadow, your softness, your mistakes. You admit when you're wrong, not from shame, but from maturity. You evolve without performing growth. You are real, not rehearsed. Most won't understand this frequency, because it doesn't beg to be seen, but it draws in those ready for depth. Integrity magnetizes truth, and truth magnetizes the right people. And once you live from this core, you no longer fear who you are. You witness yourself with compassion. And that witnessing is the beginning of something sacred, self-awareness, the final doorway home. Self-awareness is the moment the mirror turns inward. You stop asking, "What do they see?" and begin asking, "What lives in me?" Jung called this the start of individuation, the journey back to your center, not to become someone new, but to remember who you are. This path isn't glamorous. It reveals contradictions, unconscious habits, hidden pain, but it also reveals truth. And truth once seen can't be unseen. It becomes the compass of your becoming. A self-aware woman doesn't rush to change herself. She sits with what's there. She watches the impulse without acting it out. She listens to her resistance without shame. That's how the psyche begins to reorganize. She no longer fears discomfort. She interprets it. Every trigger becomes a teacher. Every emotion becomes data. And slowly, chaos becomes pattern. Pattern becomes meaning. This is not self-obsession. It's self-return. You're not trying to fix. You're trying to integrate. You stop editing your soul to fit the moment. You let the moment meet your soul. And in that meeting, power is born. Women on this path radiate something rare, not confidence, but clarity. They don't seek answers outside. They seek alignment inside. And that alignment changes everything, because self-awareness leads to freedom. freedom from patterns, from performance, from projection. It opens the door to a life lived from within. And that is where the real journey begins, toward wholeness, toward depth, toward you. Every silent action you take sends a message, not just to men, but to your own soul. You're not just learning to be seen, you're remembering how to see yourself. And when that happens, they feel it, because nothing is more powerful than a woman in alignment with herself. So, tell me, which of these silent archetypes already lives in you? And which one are you ready to awaken? What have you withheld, not out of fear, but out of wisdom? If this journey stirred something inside you, don't walk away from it. Subscribe. Activate the bell and stay with us, because this channel isn't about tips, it's about transformation, and your next evolution begins in silence.